Here's something nobody tells you when you bring a baby home. Every other primate on this planet is born ready. A baby gorilla grips its mother's fur within minutes. A foal is on its feet before it's an hour old. Even a newborn chimpanzee has enough muscle coordination to cling on and hold tight. Your baby couldn't do any of that. Your baby couldn't lift its own head, couldn't grip, couldn't walk for a year, couldn't feed itself for years, couldn't survive a single hour outside of someone's arms without the very real possibility of dying. And here's the question nobody asks. How, in a world full of predators and darkness and freezing nights with no hospitals, no formula, no baby monitors, how did any of us make it? The answer overturns almost everything we believe about parenting. It changes how we understand family, how we explain loneliness, and why millions of modern parents feel like they're failing at something that should feel natural. They're not failing. They've just been handed a task that no human being in history was ever supposed to do the way we're doing it now. Let's go back to the beginning. If you want to understand how our ancestors raised children, you first have to understand the strange biological trap that made it so hard. Human infants are born premature by design. This sounds wrong, but it's true. The human brain grows at a rate that creates a literal architectural problem. If a human baby's brain were as developed at birth as a chimpanzee's, the skull would be so large it could not pass through the birth canal. Mother and infant would both die. So evolution found a workaround. It decided, push the baby out early, finish building the brain afterward. A chimpanzee is born with roughly 40% of its brain already developed. A human baby arrives with about 25%. That means 3/4 of the most complex organ in the known universe has to be built while the child is already outside the womb, entirely helpless, completely dependent, and unable to do a single thing to protect itself. This is the deal our species made. We got unmatched intelligence. We paid for it with the most defenseless infancy of any creature on Earth. And for 99% of human history, that defenseless infant had to survive in a world that was actively trying to kill it. Predators that could track a newborn's scent from distances most of us can't even comprehend. Cold that could drop body temperature in minutes. Darkness where anything could happen. The infant could not be put down. It could not be left alone. It could not even cry out without advertising its location to every dangerous thing in the vicinity. So how did humans solve this problem? Not with tools, not with intelligence, with each other. Here's a fact that changes the entire story of early parenting. Across virtually every hunter-gatherer society ever studied, the raising of an infant was never, not once, treated as the job of one person. In 2009, anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy introduced a term that reframes human evolution entirely. She called us cooperative breeders. What that means is this. Unlike our closest primate relatives, human beings evolved to raise children as a group activity, not as a social preference, not as a cultural tradition, as a biological strategy encoded into our bodies and our babies' nervous systems over hundreds of thousands of years. Look at the chimpanzee for contrast. A chimpanzee mother raises every infant almost entirely alone. She will not allow other individuals to handle or hold her baby. She is suspicious, protective, territorial. If another female reaches for her infant, she will react with force. This is the default primate setting, my offspring, my responsibility, full stop. Humans went in the completely opposite direction. Among the Ife people of the Congo's Ituri rainforest, researchers recorded something that stopped them in their tracks. A typical infant in this group was held by an average of 14 different individuals during a single 8-hour window. 14. The infant was transferred between arms. Roughly every 7 or 8 minutes, the biological mother held the child for less than half the time everyone else. Aunts, older children, grandmothers, women from neighboring families with no direct genetic connection to the child, took turns. Some of those women nursed the infant themselves. In another group, the AKA of Central Africa, researchers found that fathers maintained physical proximity to their infants for nearly half of the waking day. Not visiting, not checking in. Physically present within arm's reach for nearly half their waking hours. This was not a trend. This was not a parenting philosophy. This was simply how humans had always lived. The baby was never alone, the baby was never still, and there was a reason for both of those things that goes deeper than comfort. When our early ancestors shifted to walking upright, something else changed along with their posture. They lost their fur. This might seem like a minor inconvenience, but for infants, it was a survival crisis. Primate babies cling, that's their survival mechanism, grip the mother's coat with both hands and hang on, no hands-free required from the mother. No energy spent on carrying. The baby manages its own attachment while the mother moves. A human baby has nothing to grip. Smooth skin where the fur used to be. No handles, no way to self-attach, which means someone always has to be holding it. Ancient humans solved this with what may be the first human technology designed specifically around infant care. Slings, made from animal hide, woven plant fiber, strips of bark, worn across the chest or back, keeping the infant pressed against a warm body at all times. The evidence for this goes back much further than anyone expected. In Italy, archaeologists uncovered the burial site of an infant named Neve, who died roughly 10,000 years ago. Alongside the remains were decorative elements consistent with what researchers believe was a structured baby carrier. But the sling wasn't just a carrying device. What happened when a baby was held against a human body reveals something extraordinary about infant neurology. When a baby is picked up and held close, against warmth, pressed to a heartbeat, its own heart rate drops. Its breathing slows and regulates. It stops crying. Scientists call this the transport response. It's a reflex so ancient and so deeply embedded that it still activates in every human infant today. Here's what makes it remarkable. The response exists because in the ancestral environment, being picked up and carried meant safety. It meant predators could not hear you. It meant you were mobile, moving away from danger. A crying baby on the ground was a dead baby. A silent baby in motion was a baby that survived. So when early human infants were carried, their nervous systems told them, "You're safe, be quiet, stop signaling our location." The next time you pick up a screaming infant and it suddenly goes calm against your chest, that is not simply comfort. That is a biological program running exactly as it was designed to run, a program built by hundreds of thousands of years of predators and darkness and the cost of making noise in the wrong place at the wrong time. The baby still thinks, on some ancient level below language and consciousness, that it is being carried to safety. Keeping the baby held and warm was only part of the challenge. The other part was keeping it fed. There was no formula, no bottles, no sterilized water, no soft packaged food in squeezable pouches. In the Paleolithic world, a baby's only safe food source was human breast milk, and mothers in hunter-gatherer communities nursed their infants for a minimum of 2 to 3 years. In many groups, 4 years or longer was the standard. This wasn't cultural pressure. It was basic survival logistics. Breast milk was sterile. It carried antibodies. It adapted its own composition as the infant grew. In a world without medicine, without clean water, without any way to treat an intestinal infection in a child, breast milk was the single most powerful immune tool available. And breastfeeding at that frequency had another effect that changed how populations grew. It suppressed the mother's ovulation. A woman nursing a young infant around the clock would not become pregnant again for years. In a world where having 2 completely helpless infants simultaneously could mean losing both, this natural spacing wasn't just convenient. It was the mechanism that made survival manageable. When the infant began to need more than milk, the community fed it the only way available. Pre-chewed food passed directly from the mouth of the caregiver into the mouth of the infant. The adult, mother, grandmother, aunt, older sibling, chewed tough roots, meat, or fibrous plant material until it was broken down, then transferred it lip to lip into the baby's waiting mouth. Along with that softened food came something invisible and invaluable: saliva-carrying digestive enzymes, immune cells. The microbial signature of the community's shared environment, preparing the infant's immune system for the world it had been born into. Some anthropologists now believe this practice, repeated thousands of times between caregivers and infants across hundreds of thousands of years, may be the evolutionary origin of kissing. Not as romance, as feeding, as the most intimate form of care that existed before anyone had a spoon. Now here's the part of this story that science didn't expect. In almost every other species on Earth, females die shortly after they can no longer reproduce. Nature is not sentimental about this. But human women live for decades after menopause, decades. Long after the ability to have children ends, the body keeps going. Still strong, still productive, still capable of extraordinary physical and social contribution. Why? In 1997, anthropologist Kristen Hawkes began studying the Hadza people in Tanzania, one of a small number of surviving hunter-gatherer groups. She went looking for the answer to that exact question. What she found was grandmothers. Postmenopausal Hadza women were among the most productive members of the entire group. They worked longer hours than almost anyone else. They foraged in intense heat, digging for deeply buried tubers that required skill and stamina to extract, food that young children could not access on their own. And they fed their grandchildren. By providing direct caloric support to grandchildren, postmenopausal women freed their own daughters to have another baby sooner. The grandmother was already handling the last one. This created a cycle where grandmothers who helped grandchildren survive passed on more of their genes, including the genes for living longer after menopause, than grandmothers who did not. Hawkes called this the grandmother hypothesis. What it means is this: the reason human women outlive their fertility, the reason you likely have a grandmother who is still alive and functional decades after she could have had children, is because ancient women who did exactly that produced more surviving grandchildren. Your grandmother's long life is an evolutionary strategy. Menopause is not the body giving up. It is the body shifting roles. one of the most successful shifts in the entire history of our species. This is where the story stops being about the ancient past and starts being about right now. For the entire 300,000-year history of our species, no mother raised a child alone. The concept didn't exist. The biology didn't allow it. The environment didn't permit it. Every infant in every human community that ever survived did so because a network of people, 5, 10, 15 individuals, actively participated in keeping that child alive every single day. The mother was one part of a system, a critical part, but one part. Today, in most of the industrialized world, that entire system has been compressed into a household of 2, sometimes 1. You are sitting in a house at 3 in the morning, alone with an infant whose nervous system was built for a village, trying to do something your biology never once prepared you for, to be the whole network by yourself. The exhaustion that modern parents feel, the kind that doesn't respond to sleep, the kind that sits in your bones, that is not a character flaw. That is not weakness. That is the predictable, inevitable result of trying to meet a biological need that was designed to be shared across a dozen people with just your own 2 arms. The loneliness that new parents describe, that particular silence at 2 a.m., that sense of isolation that no amount of baby gear can fix, that is your nervous system noticing on some level beneath words that the rest of the group is missing. That something is structurally wrong. Not with you, with the setup. We built a world that broke the village apart and then told parents the village was optional. It was never optional. It was always the point. There's a reason this story matters outside of history textbooks and anthropology journals. Understanding what humans were actually built for, what our infants' bodies are actually responding to, what our own exhaustion is actually pointing to, changes how we talk about parenting. It changes what we ask for. It changes what we're willing to ask for. Your baby goes quiet when you hold it not because you're doing something special, but because you are activating a system that was built over hundreds of thousands of years to keep small human bodies alive in a dangerous world. That system still works exactly as designed. It just needs more than one person running it. For 300,000 years, our species solved the impossible problem of the helpless infant the same way. Every time. Not through technology, not through individual strength, through collective care. The child survived because enough people decided it would. That is the oldest truth in human history, and it's the one we most need to remember right now. If this kind of content makes you think differently about the world, the real science behind human behavior, the evolutionary stories hiding underneath everyday life, then subscribe, because this is exactly what we're here for. A new video drops every week, and I promise you, the next one will hit just as hard.